folks. Thank you very much for joining me today on this episode of the Schusterian Logic Podcast. Today I have Dr. Hillary Hines on the call. I met her recently at I believe it was a general boot camp.
Demo.
General boot camp demo day. And I wanted to talk to her, not just because of her project, but because she actually has a medical degree, actually as a doctor, and is now going into UX design, which I just thought was very, very interesting background. So, and she was also looking for specific guidance on what to be able to do with that. So I'm hoping to be able to give some feedback and hopefully give you some place to go. So Hillary, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me and for giving me this guidance. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So I guess I got to start with the first question, which is, so how did you go from MD to UX? Like, what did that path look like for you?
Great question. So I graduated med school in 2018, and I did 2 years of, well, we like to call it mandatory service to our government and to our country. And what had happened was, while going through the motion of learning medicine in school, and this is how things are supposed to be in a very ideal setting with the controlled setting, and then trying to apply that in a world that is not the same, I realized that, to be honest, medicine did not give me an approach as to how to deal with all those types of problems. Now, you do have the regular patient where they come with a problem, prescribe a treatment, and that's kind of the end of the conversation. But when I was dealing with patients who more had chronic issues, simple things like hypertension or diabetes, or patients who were really struggling with complications of diseases, like they were constantly having heart attacks, and so they were constantly having to be in hospital, they were constantly having strokes. It was like, that was when things started to get a little bit more hazy. Like, what do you do to prevent this from happening? It's not enough to just tell these patients the same thing that they hear every single visit, which is eat right, take your medication, do this, do that. But I felt like the approach I was looking for, like, it was hard to get that type of guidance and that type of expertise. And that's just for patients alone. Now, as a medical doctor, practicing medicine, it's really intense. Like, if that was all I ever had to do, that is already super demanding. But then that wasn't my only job. I had to play the roles of many different people. I had to be the administrative clerk. I had to be a cashier. I had to be a porter that takes patients to get their x-rays done. I had to be everything. And that was really taxing, because in my country, which is Jamaica, we do 36-hour shifts. So from 8 a.m. today to 4 p.m., hopefully, if you're lucky, the next day, you're just working constantly, no sleep, no nothing. And so there's already so much demand on me physically and mentally, to have to think about things like, where is that blood test form? How do I get this patient to do this? I remember having to get really critical blood tests done on a patient, but then the system by which I could get that done was so complicated that something that could take 10 minutes was taking an hour. And it's like, there was that part of it too that was really frustrating, and I just didn't want to be the person that constantly complained about things and didn't try to solve them myself. So exactly. So I was supposed to do psychiatry. I was supposed to be a psychiatry attending, but they kind of pushed me off for about 6 months because of the pandemic. So those students didn't graduate, so I couldn't start. And so I took those 6 months to decide to explore what could I do to solve all of these problems. I looked at health administration. I looked at all kinds of things, and nothing was really clicking. And so eventually I hired a career coach, and we spoke about the kind of person I was, how I envisioned myself, even maybe outside of medicine, just as Hillary Hines. And so that was the strategy that I then used to start looking at different roles that I could play. And I could tell you, Brian, I said no to about like 60 different roles until I randomly saw UX design on a random website when I was looking for just random. Like, I've been looking for months at this point. It took me 6 months, by the way, exactly, to find UX design. And they had this list of creative jobs, and they had things like art director. I said no. Graphic design, no. Musician, no.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this thing that said UX. I didn't even spell it out, Brian. They just said UX design, and I said something about that just looks interesting
Huh.
and mysterious. And I read the first sentence, and I was like, "Yep, this is me. This
What
is what
was
I was
that?
looking
What was
for."
that sentence, if you don't mind me asking, if you
Sure,
remember?
sure. So, from what I remember, they said user experience design is the intersection between technology, business, and psychology. That is used to improve people's experiences, mainly in technology, but it can also be applied to different areas. And I said, "What? This is exactly what I was looking for." And funny story, right before, about 2 weeks before I saw that post, I had actually just laid all my cards on the table and said, I can't find what I'm looking for, but if I could do anything in the world, if I could make up my own job, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would try to like have a focus on the healthcare experience for patients.
Hmm.
Not just necessarily seeing them and prescribing drugs, but actually like all I would do is just focus on the experience, how to make things easier for them, how to tailor treatments to their specific context, and do the same for my healthcare worker colleagues as well. And then that popped up, so it was like a match made in heaven, career
Wonderful.
soulmates.
Wow. Okay, so you read that title, you found it, which is very like you don't see a lot of people there. Like most people who are making a transition in technology are so, I guess, desperate to find a match where they're like, oh, what's the easiest thing or what's the best full stack data analytics? I'll just go through. It seems like you took a lot of care to find where you wanted to go into. So, okay, so you discovered UX design, and then did you try to self teach first before, or did you, as soon as you found it, did you decide to get into a program? What was that process like?
Great question. So, thanks to my career coach, Cheryl Massam, she gave me the great advice of doing informational interviews once I found what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
right? So, I'm in Jamaica. UX is honestly not, it's kind of becoming more of a thing since the pandemic, but
Hmm.
definitely at that time, it was still pretty new. I remember when I told my friends and everybody what I wanted to do, they were like, UX? What's that?
What's that?
Yes. But my sister, who has a great memory, she remembered that 4 years ago she saw an article in our local newspaper that had featured a UX designer that had actually gone to, I think it was Indiana University on a Fulbright scholarship. Her name is,
Right.
yes, her name is Danique Ferguson. She went from business analyst to UX. And I emailed her, I cold emailed her, did not know her, did not know anybody who knew her. And she answered me, and she did a Google Meet just like what we're doing now. And she spent about 3 hours with me, giving me the rundown of what the process is like and the different forms. So she mentioned self taught. She also mentioned the master's program, like what
Right.
she did in human computer interaction, and she also mentioned boot camps. So I said, okay, there are different options here. Um, how I ended up at GA Tech's boot camp really was by chance. I was actually looking at their master's program for
Hmm.
human computer interaction. To be honest, it's not as accessible for me here as a Jamaican to do a master's program in the
Hmm.
States. I did go to Fulbright, like they had passed the first entry level, and so they were telling me more about the program and what would be expected. What I didn't love was that they said that I would have to be bonded to Jamaica for like a year or two,
Right.
and I was like, uh, don't know if I mean, I've already spent 2 years of my professional life being bonded somewhere. Like I kind
Right.
of wanted more freedom, so the boot camp was running in about 2 months time, and I looked into it, and it seemed like it had really good reviews from the students who had gone. And so I said, okay, let's jump right in. I had an admissions interview with Jessica Slonick, who was
Hmm.
great, and I got accepted into the boot camp, and it was a really great experience. And now here I am, graduated for about 6 weeks now.
So excellent. Okay, so you've been graduated for 6 weeks, and go into details. And now it seems like what we talked before the call, how you're basically looking for opportunities that are specific for you. And I guess we'll start to get into like maybe some specific strategies there. So
Yes.
ultimately, what is your end goal specifically? Like, what does an ideal role look like to you?
Okay. So an ideal role is a role that gives me the freedom to take initiative. That's something that I really like to do. and to follow a certain lead that I believe in. In UX design, sometimes the solution looks nothing like the problem. Like, I remember reading an article about a bunch of UX designers who solved an overfishing issue in South America, I think it
Right.
was, by building a football field, which, on the surface, those two don't seem related at all. So I don't want to feel like you are being boxed in to do things this way, because then I'm already making an assumption about the problem and about the solution if I'm already setting like certain limits
Right.
about what can be done outside of things like budgets and stuff that we know can't necessarily be changed right away. So that's the first thing. Also, a really good team. I really like teamwork. I've actually worked on over, I think it's over 48 teams in the past 2 years, because in medicine, it's all
Oh
teamwork.
wow.
And every month I was on a different team and I had to like adapt to what that team's workflow was like. And I actually really appreciate teamwork. Teamwork reduces mistakes. Teamwork saves time. And so that a team that like it believes in collaboration, working together, is really important to me. Hierarchy is definitely important, but another thing about medicine that I didn't quite love was that if my attending had an opinion or said something, that was law. It's kind of
Right.
I kind of feel like it's like the military, and that's really important because they're the ones who will take the fall if something goes wrong. So it
Right.
has to be, the buck has to stop with them. But I think in UX there might be a little bit more room to play with that, since it's not always a life or death situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate like having more of a exchange of ideas, and a more like nurturing environment in that way. Like, that's how I see myself in terms of the kind of problems that I see myself impacting. Honestly, I kind of see myself more dealing with dilemmas. So for example, in the pandemic, it's like people want to go out and have fun and socialize with friends, but doing that can put them at risk of COVID, and so they may have to
Right.
choose between their safety or going out and having fun. Like, those kind of things that seem to be pulling people in two different directions. Like, that's kind of where I see myself
Right.
being most interested, because those are very difficult problems to solve. But that's what attracts me to them.
Okay. So yeah, I want to ask more questions because I don't think I know enough to be able to give details, but I guess there's some stuff I want to start seeding, give you ideas. So maybe start a
No
discussion
problem.
here. So probably looking at your particular background and what you're doing. I mean, the fact that you have a deep well of experience in the medical field, actually working in the medical field, puts you in a category of your own when it comes to actually, being cross trained. They usually call them either bridge roles or, if they're being more generous, unicorns. They're
Oh,
basically things that if somebody's going to write a role to say, okay, we need somebody who has both a medical degree and UX experience, no one would ever write that down because you go and say you're looking for somebody who is impossible to find. So the truth
mm-hmm.
is, you're not, unless there's some very specific role. And again, you may want to do that search on LinkedIn to see, does there happen to be somebody who's looking for medical degree plus UX or something in that realm? Maybe you'll find it. I don't know the UX realm well enough to know if people find that, but I know that there will be organizations that appreciate that, but they're not specifically looking for that, and
Yeah.
we'll get into details there. But let me tell you about the different types of experiences you could go through, here. And I guess we can go into different options. If you wanted to be more entrepreneurial with your route and the direction you go through, I think I'm not sure if a freelancer or consultant in this realm is very certainly a possibility. You got a very unique skill set that requires a fair amount of digital marketing skills and idea there. Stuff that I love doing. I mean, that's what I'm building with Schusterian. I love this side of it, but I think that's one possibility where you build up your own book of business being a UX designer. You serve smaller medical facilities, and there are just tons and tons of medical facilities out there. My family was in insurance for a very long time. We served that, and it's amazing how you get like you always think of it as being major medical hospitals like the United States, but no, there's mom and pop medical facilities everywhere, and they all have they all have those sorts of problems. So that's one avenue you can go down, and so I'm going to put that there. So that's one side. The next side would almost be just a traditional big company that has a healthcare vertical, and there. like, because like at IBM, where I am, for example, we have people that are in the healthcare space, so there are going to be healthcare experts that end up working for IBM. Now the challenge is that you don't necessarily, like, it might be in the healthcare vertical and you have UX, but they're not going to ask for that background. So I guess that's what I'm warning you. You're not going to think you're a fit for any role, but I
Uh,
promise you might be there. So I'll get into why that is in a bit, but I'll put that there. So that's the second option. Big company like an IBM that has a healthcare vertical that is looking for UX designers for that organization, for that group. Third type of group is really startups, and either early phase or scale phase, where they're looking for interesting people to join their organization, where the people are wearing multiple different hats. And I get from your background, just hearing what you just your disciplined thought to go from one area to another, being able to go into UX and not even being concerned that it has nothing to do with your background, kind of makes you that might be a realm that you actually thrive in. I
okay.
wouldn't know. That's saying you'd have to check yourself, and particularly if you work. Actually, I don't even have to guess that. Like a hard day's work would be like 10 to 12 hour days at a startup, and going back, like there are 70, 80 hour weeks and things like that. But the truth is that you're probably used to the intensity, to that. So startups might be a realm. So those are kind of the three areas, and really, well, I don't know where the easiest to get in would be. They all
Mm-hmm.
present different challenges. Like, if you end up doing the entrepreneurial thing, you can scale that to pretty much any level. You could do the other two or just something else and hold clients on your own. You can do it through freelancing, you could do it through your own business, you could sell, courses or whatever. Like, you could build a business there. It's long term. It's not something you're going to be able to get immediately, and it's not going to bring, it's going to be, you're building a business effectively, and
Mm-hmm.
you have that. But that is something that you're in full control of. You can go and meet with people, but you may be solo for a bit unless you find a partner or somebody to group with. You may, it will take some time to build up and before you get a team around you. So that's the downside of that route. A big organization like an IBM, you could find a pretty decent, career in sort of, in that sort of place. You could go find a company where you have a nice seat in the organization. You're working with a big team. They're focused on interesting UX problems. I know, IBM is working with like the biggest organizations in the world. So you would have tons and tons of cases to be able to work on, tons and tons of different problems that you want to solve. And you go through that. There's lots of opportunity to grow up, grow sideways. Like, like some companies, some people have this idea that big companies, you tend to get locked into positions, or that can happen. My experience with IBM is that I've been able to move into whatever role I wish, to
Great.
go through. At least it's been very easy for me to move around. I've had lots of advancement. But again, it's also, like I said, it can also be slower. And that's the downside of a big organization, where if you want to move fast, or there's a particular type of problem you want to solve, like, you don't have an opportunity right in front of you, you can find that. But it's kind of a slow growth proposition. I mean, that's the thing. To me, like, to IBM, I see like I'm moving at lightning speed. But the truth is that
Okay.
I'm just kind of a startup guy. I work at small businesses. That's what I see. Not that the business mind, they need, they like people like that and they appreciate that. But that's another avenue for you to consider. Startups are are interesting, and for some reason I just keep going to that for you, where it's almost like I think you might enjoy that. Maybe it's the fact that I know you're used to high intensity, that might be interesting, but there are lots of startups that are in that realm that need interesting people who can kind of fit multiple different places inside their organization. You have credibility. I mean, that's a really good thing that would be considered an asset to a startup, where it's like to be able to say, they're, one of the, they have a UX designer, a UX person who is like a medical professional who really understands it. That serves a lot more than just the needs of the role. It's a bigger asset. But it's very high intensity. That's the thing. You're often in a startup not thinking about all the other problems the startup, that oh, I'm stuck on one problem, because you're usually running so fast you're not thinking about it. So you love it or hate it, you're on that path. You're going down, and you're going to some destination. You have to decide whether or not you like that once you get there. To do that. So that's where I'm naturally thinking about you, when I think about this. So let me ask, as you've gone out and looked for roles and tried that, what have you really started gravitating to, or what have you noticed about the market?
Okay, well, so I actually just went straight for healthcare type roles and healthcare companies. That's where I was looking. And of course, majority of them that I did see on LinkedIn were startups.
Hmm.
And I have to be honest, I did really connect the most with their descriptions, because I think with the startups there was this level of passion and excitement and exuberance for what they're trying to do, create their own little individual space in the world. Like,
Hmm.
I really related to that. The only thing is that because they're startups and I'm Jamaican and I do not have USA, what is citizenship, right?
Citizenship, right?
I think that's what
Visa.
you guys call it. Yes. Then it's like, okay, that would be kind of awkward because it's a startup. Do they really have that level of capital to sponsor someone
Hmm.
from the, like, not from the states? So like that was kind of a barrier that I noticed, and even my career coach and I were talking about it, and she was like, "Yeah, I think that's probably where you're going to have the hardest time." So she had given me this list, and the career coach at J Tech also gave me a list of companies that like will sponsor HB1 visas, etc. And of course, most of those companies were more corporations such as IBM or
Correct. Yeah.
Apple. Yes, instead of necessarily a startup. Now, I'm going to be honest and say, like, I don't, again, like, being in a hospital and the hospital culture in terms of job seeking is very different from what I'm doing now.
Right.
I do not want to make any assumptions and say, oh, if you're with a big corporation, that means you're going to be a corporate slave and you're going to be stuck and you're going to be like some mangled person in the corporate politics atmosphere. Like, I'm not going to make those assumptions because both my parents work in corporate and they're doing just fine.
Yeah.
But it definitely, their job descriptions were a little bit more clinical, more like matter of facts. You know, want a UX designer who's able to do A, B, C, D, E, and like they were more very specific about the type of person they wanted. Whereas at the startups, I'd noticed, oh, healthcare experience preferred, or some
Right.
other random, like they kind of were more open to a diverse
Right. Right.
experience set. So there, so I that those are the kind of differences I've seen in terms of the entrepreneurial side of things. So I actually did connect with one doctor who's also a UX designer. His name is Giles Morrison. He's in Germany. He's been doing this for about 7 years. He got his master's,
Wow.
and he's an entrepreneur right now. So I've kind of been seeing what that was like, because based on our conversation from the demo day when you were speaking about apprenticeship and experience, like I really took that seriously, and so like I went out seeking out experience as well as someone to mentor me,
Right.
and Giles was willing to do that. He's been teaching me things about medicine and UX and how they both interact in the different projects that he's done
Oh,
so
wow.
far, which has been great. And he has this level of freedom, but I think the thing is that, boy, it's kind of strange because while that freedom is very exciting, like at this stage of everything for me, I'm asking myself, is that level of freedom what you need right now, or do you need more experience? Because in medicine, how I learned was by watching someone else do something. Like that's actually how I learned things.
Right.
So I see you do something, I do it that's this way. I may change a few things, but or I may decide a different way. But if I do something, you're there to say, oh, don't do that, or maybe this is right, or maybe that could work, or maybe that couldn't work. Again, it's about an apprenticeship, and that is the type of learning environment that I'm used to. And that is why I guess with corporations there is a bit of an attraction there, because there's usually more of a hierarchy and like a a flow through which information goes. And so if I needed guidance from X person, I know exactly who to go to. If I need to learn from Y person, so it said there's a sort of like, I'm not really sure
I,
which way to go.
well, I can give you some insight there on what you can do. I mean, like where you are right now, you have a very good background. From the direction you're going. I mean, the health. It's interesting. It's really interesting, and I can see somebody taking a chance on you because again, when you come down to like what sort of boot camp graduates tend to be the most successful, or the ones that are like really like, and other people get hired, they tend to be the T-shaped person, in the direction I talk about this all the time, but that your actual technical well is very shallow by that point. You're just going
Yes.
to have project work, you're going to have education, but you're not going to have the sort of experience that someone who's been doing this for a couple of years, or even like maybe a longer program, like a master's program, is going to have. But because you're a working professional, you have professional experience, you know how to deal with teams, you have great soft skills, you often build up communication. And that's usually if you just have some professional experience. And on top of that, you actually have medical. And like, I'm willing to bet that, barring the other issues that you brought up, like the visa, that you're going to find people who say, yeah, let's go and take a chance on you. So I see that's why I think you have very good prospects.
Thank you.
So talking about corporation versus not. So I guess that's my belief, where that's the thing. I've worked for IBM now for about 3 years or so, and that's the thing. I've kind of refused to let the machine do stuff to me. Like, that's the thing. You can get sucked into the machine, but you have to let it, or you have to believe the machine's there. I mean, often when I see people compromising is because they believe they don't have any options other than to let the machine do this. I've kind of always had in my mind, once IBM stops making sense for my growth, I'm going to leave. That hasn't been true. I've gotten great opportunities, but knowing that looseness is there, where it's like, look, there is a point where it's it's not a good deal anymore. And it's not a particularly deep well either. So only a few things have to go, poorly for me to go and say, this isn't working out for me. But fortunately, so the entire time I'm kind of weighing the scales and going to saying, does it work, does it not? So keeping that perspective stops me from making those compromises, versus it's the people who think they can't say no that really fall deep into the hole, guys who think that they don't have any other options, that this is a good deal, or that if they get fired, it's going to be this awful thing. Which is why I've always done this. So as long as you know you have options and you can leave, you'll have perspective to know when you're crossing a line and when to push back against the machine. And you push back, it will respond. And even if they're not willing to give in, well, this is a line I'm not willing to cross, and so be it. So don't worry about that with big companies. That being said, at the end of the day, if you really want the freedom, you can always get that later. I mean, that's the thing. Freedom is something you can generate for yourself or you can earn for yourself, right? You can build up an income. You can know that's a goal of yours, and you can build it up over time. For people coming out of boot camps, it's really, really important that you get the experience. That's really the critical thing. Get experience in your domain, get at least 6 months underneath your belt, just so that you know what it's like, that you have a good story. And then you can start to look elsewhere, or doing that. Or at the very least, if you don't want to do 6 months, have a contract where it is a 3-month contract with a company.
Yes.
I was just talking with someone else who is part of the Schusterian newsletter, who was talking about working for a startup, and it's kind of a crazy culture, and they weren't sure, she wasn't sure what to do. And my recommendation was, well, tell them you need a 3-month contract. Basically, you're going to work for them for 3 months. You're going to work for them for a short period of time. If at the end of that 3 months, if it doesn't work out, you're going to decide, it was a good experience. And on your resume, it's just a really easy, it was a 3-month contract. I got experience. I did it. We moved on, and it's a nice tight story to be able to tell, versus it was supposed to be, you only work for 3 months. You're like, oh, you were full time. What happened? Then you have to tell the story of, well, I got fired or this, and it doesn't look as good. So you can always, find a way to tell the story better, or, that you can structure it ahead of time better. But at least from you say which one's most important, the freedom or experience. I would say it's definitely the experience. Find the place that you can actually practice your skills within your domain. And so whichever one, ultimately, if you're finding you have restrictions, and again, I wasn't thinking about the visa aspect, because that would put a hurdle. You want to find the thing that gets you around those restrictions, and then within that, pick what makes sense. Yes. So in that case, somebody willing to work with an H1B, H1B hire might be a good place. Are there any options locally that you can consider, or anything attractive locally?
Good question. So we do have a few little companies that are looking into UX designers. So Sagicor, they're actually an insurance company actually. So they deal with healthcare all the time. So they're looking for a UX designer as well. They had put out a role for one. Some banks as well are looking for UX designers. There are also maybe some smaller companies, but those companies, they don't tend to post. It's more of like a word of mouth type
Right.
of thing. So I'd have to go around and look and find things. So that those are opportunities there. There are also opportunities in terms of private practices. Granted, no one has communicated this to me, but if I had the metal or desire to say, I'm going to go to 5 private practices of doctors that I already know and worked with and say, hey, like, it could be as simple as redesigning a website. It could be as
Right.
simple as redesigning one aspect of their entire business. And then there may be others who say, oh, well, I actually want you to make my entire business more productive. How do I
Right.
get that done? So those are things that I could do as well. But I guess the biggest barrier would be because UX design is so new over here, the idea of things go in stages for most people's brains.
Yeah.
So they hear something brand new, like UX design, and they're not going to think, this is something that can really, really grow my business from a strategic point of view. They may say, oh, but before I need a UX designer, I need a marketer, or I need
Right.
like some other role. Most people don't necessarily have that expansive, or as you call it, exponential
Mm-hmm.
thinking to say, I want my business to grow to here, and this person can help me get there. And also with doctors, we don't, my community doesn't, we don't like things we don't understand very
Yeah.
well.
That'd be
Like
the
that.
particulars of your industry. Yeah.
Yes. Like if we see something that we don't know what it is, it's a I find that most doctors tend to just ignore it or dismiss it, and I can tell that what I have chosen to do is something that is very untraditional, virtually unheard of here, to be completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I do question, like, what would the reception be like? I have spoken to a few doctors about this, maybe like one or two who are my mentors, and they're really happy with it, but they're retired, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're fascinated because they're at that level of their career where they want to have real impact. They want to put themselves
Right.
into their jobs.
They're
So
about legacy at this point.
exactly. So they are more receptive to the ideas of a user experience designer than somebody who's, I'm just trying to see 30 patients a day and earn and leave and go to my next job and just go from point A to point B. I'm just in grind mode.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that a lot of doctors are in our healthcare system as well. So how it works here is that you either do a program like me, or like what I was going to do, or you will work for the government on a contract basis. And so what that means is that they don't they may not have that level of freedom to say, hey, I want to bring in this person to help me, like, because just like what you said about corporations and how there is a machine and you can choose like to push back or
Right.
yeah, it's hard to push back in our machine to a large extent for many reasons, and so most people don't. So like again, that level of expansive or radical thinking, I don't know. And then also, would they be willing to pay for that? Not that,
Right.
yeah, not, I mean, granted, like, I just really would love experience. That's like my main thing. But would that be something that they consider valuable enough to spend money on at some point?
Right. So yeah,
Lots
we're
of,
yeah. So let me kind of give you some parting ideas here to go
sure.
through and think about this. So about those resumes that or those job descriptions that are very corporate before that you kind of
Yeah.
mentioned, don't let that scare you away from applying to jobs and actually
Okay.
go and talk with them. The problem with a lot of those things is that like when I was applying to jobs, like literally the worst HR experience in my whole process. I mean, they used the worst templates. They had like, some of the dull, very dull language, and just not good. Ended up being the job that I got, that I
Oh,
hired for. The person behind all the language was actually amazing. That was my old boss, James Skeen, and he was great. It was a very different way. I mean, that's the thing. This is a guy who basically spent his 20s being literally in a band in California for like a decade, then decided one day, I'm going to be a software developer, and he was. He actually just left IBM to go be a Linux administrator at not Tesla, SpaceX.
I love
Like,
that.
right, and doing that, and it's like that's the guy behind this boring ass process. So you never know what that looks like. So I
That's
would
true.
say, like what I would say is that if you're resisting applying to jobs at this particular point, don't do that.
Oh
Go
no.
off, apply, just go and have the discussion there, because that's the thing. The initial process of the resume and the job description, it's a very inefficient market where it's not really people talking to people. It's pieces of
Mm,
information rejecting or accepting other pieces of information. Once you get to that first manager interview, that's when you can turn your brain on and actually make a decision on, do I want to continue talking? Do I like these guys? Are they giving me what I
okay.
want to? So I would say do that for the startups, do that for the guys, and just get a feel for what the job looks like. That'll give you experience. And I promise, with your background, I would be surprised if you didn't get that. Again, I've been surprised before, but I'd be surprised if at least you didn't get more discussion. That's one thing you can do. But while you're doing that, if you're starting to get the inclination that, like, you have this drive just to see if someone's willing to pay for it, like the questions you were asking before
Yes.
were, will people pay for this? Are people ready for this sort of thing? They're valid
Yes.
questions, and we don't know. But the truth is that, well, you don't know, but you don't have to spend a lot of money to figure that out.
Exactly.
There's a book that I just picked up, and there's a whole community now that I'm part of. It's called the Minimalist Entrepreneur by Sahil. He started a company called Gumroad in 2011. Thought it would be $1 billion company, but ended up, basically, he didn't run it into the ground. It just didn't run as fast as the venture capitalist
Mhm.
needed to. He basically shut down the business for everyone but himself. He was the only one
Okay.
working at it, and then he rebuilt it, and he started becoming this, started becoming a big fan of small businesses, or smaller, businesses. He ended up starting this nice, this community. He actually wrote an article in 2018 where he talked about his journey that ended up turning into a book. Well, the whole premise of the book is, well, how do you build, these right-sized businesses where you're serving a needing community? A lot of what you're talking about sounds like that, where it's very, very passion
Isn't
driven. It's very passion economy esque, and it's like, this community, it locally, the doctors there, you have a passion to help them and move in that direction, but you're not sure if they're quite ready. So his whole methodology is starting with the community, getting involved, meeting with people, finding where they go and talk, communicating with them, starting to solve problems, starting to create solutions there. And it's not
okay.
actually starting with consulting. It's not even that. It's really just starting, like what we're doing right now is, kind of that thing where I'm having a discussion with you to help you because I want to help you. Like I said, Schusterian, will it be a business eventually? Probably. Is it right now? No, I'm just helping people. And that's
And I so appreciate it. Oh
right,
my
right.
goodness.
Right, and that's what it could be for you. So that's what I would recommend. If you're not doing it right now, there is, start applying to those jobs, start having those discussions. Because again, like you're saying there, same thing. Well, will these startups be willing to sponsor it? Some of them, the answer will definitely no. You can't do that, and let me tell you, they should screen out for that. Like I know for me, unfortunately, I hate it. I can't hire H-1Bs for the roles that I'm in, but that's the thing. My recruiter screens those out, and you write that in. However, you can go and start applying to those, and if they say H-1B, be honest, and if they talk to you, maybe it's not a yes from them, but maybe they're intrigued. Again,
Okay.
your background is such that you have an interesting mix of professional experience. The 36-hour things is damn impressive. And let me tell you, in startup world, the grind is everything. Like
Yes.
that's what I mean. People like think that, like, yeah, I worked an 80-hour week. It's like, yeah, and you slept 7 weeks, 7 days last week. I can't say the same. That's an impressive. That's something that will impress that group of people. Or at least
Woo.
people in that realm. So you have the professional experience, you have a medical degree on top of that, plus this UX design there. You're interesting. So I would say apply to the jobs and start talking with them just to get that
Okay.
experience. But since you already seem to be passionate about it, go find your community, go start talking to these doctors, and don't even pitch it as, you don't even have to pitch it as, I'm starting a business, I'm starting consulting. Just start to see what problems are solving, and maybe the
Yeah.
ideas come through. And actually, I'll send you a link to this community that I'm a part of, to go through. Talk with the people who are building stuff. Maybe you'll jive with that, maybe some good ideas come up. So anyway, that would be my recommendation. But do you have any follow-up or any additional questions?
Sure. I really love the concept of like just having conversations because I wasn't really that comfortable with pitching myself because again, like as a designer, I don't like to pitch if I don't know the problem. I don't understand you in order to
Right.
pitch you appropriately. So like just the idea of, oh, we just it's just a conversation, just communication. I really love that concept because I've kind of started doing that with our Ministry of Health. They just kind of threw me on testing out some of their stuff for epidemiologists and things like that. And it's just a conversation that we have for about 90 minutes weekly. And I was thinking, I really like doing this, but am I doing the right thing? Is this appropriate? But I'm happy to know that yes, it's actually good to be in these spaces just to learn, just to observe, just to be able to empathize,
Oh,
and then
right.
the the path and the direction will come from all of those things that are happening. Like that's really encouraging to me, and it feels more natural to me that way than I'm going to stalk out this person for this specific purpose, like I'm a vulture. Like I'm
Right.
not that
Right,
person.
right. And
Like,
that the thing that I think you're experiencing, because I have this too, is that you don't understand the problem well enough, and so you're
that,
kind of taking a stab in the dark, and you're trying to, as Seth Godin, who's the author of This Is Marketing, kind of puts, you're
oh,
stealing.
follow his blog.
Yeah, yeah, right. You're stealing people's attention. You're stealing
Yes.
their attention. You're not trying to earn it. You're not trying to be it. You're
Mm-hmm.
going out there and doing that. So you're kind of feeling this disconnect here because you clearly care about this. And you, again, you need to get paid at the end of the day, which is why I recommend, like, start with the startup, start with the other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get an offer, you can make the decision on whether or not freedom or experience really matters to you, if that offer
Yes.
goes. But there's something to be said about, if you have a community you're already connected to, which you do, doctors, people in this area, you have a global community too, where you have a mentor in Germany, you can make a name for yourself to start off by saying, I know UX, I know the principles there, here are what the doctors deal with, and just start experimenting with that avenue. They're like this is one thing that I've learned only recently in the last couple of years, just how critical authorship is
Mm-hmm.
to actually building a technical career. Like
Okay.
it's not every sort of technical career, right? There's I won't go too deep into this. You can think about, like, we kind of block our senior people into three different groups. There are three different types of deep technical people. So in IBM, you have the management track and then you have the technical track, and they basically are, both go up to executive level, both are senior people. I mean, you have the IBM fellows who sit at the top of the technical track, so very prestigious and good. But even that role has three, we kind of have three different types of people that fit that. You
Mm-hmm.
have the SME, who's who you have in mind when you think of a technical person. They are an expert in DB2, they are an expert in WebSphere, they're an expert in Nginx, whatever it might be. They are a deep technical expert, and all they do is code, or whatever. But then there's two other types of individuals. One of them is like a master problem solver, someone who will just go through, and you can throw them at any problem, any situation, and they will figure it out. They'll go in, they'll wrangle it. They're good at uncovering, and they just will just dive until they solve it. These are the sorts of people where your top white glove client is screaming because something's wrong, and you have to get it done. This is the person you throw in this situation. You have no clue
Okay.
what it is. They'll figure it out. Third type of person is a strategist. Basically, there's somebody who sits and knows all the different technology that exists out there and can put the pieces together in such a way that you can form new systems, new ideas.
Okay.
It's not that all of them are technical, but they're technical in different ways. So
Yes.
an SME may not be, that's the sort of personality we don't necessarily think of coming out to the world and doing stuff. Usually you think of them working elsewhere. But the other two types of personalities spend
Mhm.
way more time on authorship. And the final type, that's their career. They do that. I mean, our one of the IBM fellows I know at IBM actually built his career writing books on this
Wow.
subject and doing that. And basically, he writes. He's a great strategist. So I guess that's something else. Even if it doesn't turn into a product for you, even if you decide, I want to work for an IBM, or I want to work for this person in Germany, a job opened up all of a sudden, or you go elsewhere, you may want to consider keeping that path open locally to help that community. Because even if it
Yes.
turns into nothing, you can get videos of yourself talking to folks here. You can bring UX to this community. You can help sell them the idea of, yeah, UX actually matters,
Yes.
and do that. And then one day, if you decide to open the business, and that's kind of the great thing about this, you're not trying to sell them on Dr. Hines. You're just trying to sell them on, here is UX, here's this thing you really should care about. And if you do your job well enough, eventually they'll go and say, yeah, I really care about this. Who am I going to talk to about helping me with UX? why not Dr. Hines? Like that's, you can sell the market. You can be totally 100% altruistic. You can bring in no money and get paid elsewhere, and it'll still help your career in spades. So I
Yeah.
really think that that's a path you should be considering at the very least, because it's fun.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I even like started writing these things about looking back at my experience as an intern and how UX could have saved my life
Right.
or made my life easier or maybe saved that patient's life, to be honest, that I
Yeah.
keep remembering, or help that patient's outcome be
Oh,
better.
that would be an awesome
Like,
article.
I have all these different like ideas that I've just been writing down, and I've, of course, you have that little doubt that says, will people like want to hear this or care about this? But I'm gonna put it out there anyway. I mean,
Hmm.
it's me. What else can I do?
All right. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you start off. I mean, like you're not going to get the experience. I mean, it takes a long time to build up an audience and get that stuff there, and it takes, particularly because you have multiple masters here. When you initially start, it's usually like word of mouth, initial people, even
Yeah.
on like a platform. But then at some point, you're just trying to get the algorithm to engage.
Mm.
I'm enjoying this, so I'm going to keep going here.
Oh, thanks. I'm
So
enjoying it
this is
too.
this is actually not the first time I've tried building a brand around myself. I actually
Okay.
successfully did it in 2016 when I started learning about blockchain technology. And again,
Great. Yes, you told us
I
about that.
yeah, I loved it. I didn't know, but I didn't know anything about it. So I just taught myself. I learned it, and I found out that I had a knack for explaining this to people. I really liked that. So at the time, I was writing on Quora, and I was getting like no audience. I didn't have anyone, and I was writing mostly about big data, online courses. Actually, funny, probably the precursor to Schusterian actually was my writing on Quora before I pivoted hard to technology. And then I started talking about blockchain, and all of a sudden, whatever reason, the algorithm picked up. And I went from, like 1,000 views in a week to like 10,000 to 15,000, and
Wow.
it grew. And then, like, it was in 2017 was when I started really writing about it. And that's the year cryptocurrency really first broke through to the
Yep.
mainstream, where Bitcoin really became well known. Ethereum was becoming a thing, and Quora was a decent platform. People went to it for questions there. So in November of that year, I actually broke 1 million views for the month. I had articles that I was writing for Hacker Noon at that point. I had an article in the International Business Journal. Like, I was actually really did well, but now it's like I'm starting over from the beginning. And that's the
Okay.
thing I've learned, where it's like, yeah, it's and some of these don't pick up. I'm still learning about the audience. I don't know how to talk to them yet. But the truth is that if you don't count, like, and I mean literally count, like, look, you look at the markers to know, did this work? Did this work? Did this work? Yay, no, kind of. Let's workshop it. But if you don't take it personally, you can just throw it out there. I mean, it's not like a job where, okay, I need you to do this job. If you fail, that's bad. If you do a good thing, it's good. There's an outcome here. Here, it's kind of like you're starting from failure. Oh, if I put out something and I have 0 views, that's the worst. It can't go worse than that. It can
Yes.
only go up. Let's say I have my YouTube videos. Like, I have 0 views. Now I have 10. That's a win for the day, you
Oh,
know?
wait. Yes. The iterative process. Hey, you started at 0. Now you're at 10. But that's interesting because it kind of reminds me of a plant. Like at the start, it's a seed. The seed looks nothing like the tree. It's
Right.
like you couldn't look and see, oh, this seed is going to be, well, we love mangoes here. So this seed is going to be a mango tree.
Right.
But you put it in the ground, and for a while you may not see anything, but you just keep watering. You just keep, maybe it doesn't grow the way you expect. You add some fertilizer. You may have some weeds. You may have some pests. You may have all kind of things. But then eventually it grows, and like once it starts growing, not much can stop it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. I mean, the more I'm talking with you, the more I'm thinking, like, that might be just a really wonderful thing for you to do for your community locally in general, and be able to build that. I mean, that's almost like a no fail proposition. At the worst,
yeah,
you're just helping a few people understand this
that.
realm better. At best, this could turn into a completely alternative option for you while you're looking for a job or other things. So yeah, no, I mean, but I guess in summary, you have an interesting enough background that I think somebody somewhere will be willing to take a chance on you. And that's the language I've heard people use, where it's like the best boot
Okay.
camps where you have, you're shallow in the realm that, we're hiring for, but you're interested enough that we're willing to take a chance on you.
Yeah.
That's all you're really looking for. And then you can prove yourself in the role. to do that. I think, like I said, you check out the startups, check out the big companies, and
I
just
will.
if they're there. But then finally, yeah, that last element of doing your own thing, particularly building a community. I'll send you links after we're done for the communities that I've seen, and hopefully I'll see you on the communities online. Hopefully you like that.
I love it. Thank you so much.
All right, well, awesome. Well, Dr. Hines, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Do you have any last words before we cut off the call?
Sure. This was a great session. I really like how you kind of dug deep into who I am as a person, and then we were able to kind of come up with an approach that actually works for me, that I feel good about, and that's all I could have ever asked for and more. I really appreciate this, Brian. Thank you so much.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today.